Hi, and welcome back to the Healthy Life Approach podcast. I'm Kristen Beasley, and I'm certified as a functional medicine, nutrition, and brain health coach. Today, we're continuing our Build Your Base section of the three-part plan for better brain health, focusing on something that affects your memory, mood, energy, and even your word finding more than most people realize. It's your metabolic health. Before we jump in, today's episode is being brought to you by FullScript. If you've listened for a while, you've heard me say this over and over. Be your own health advocate. And one of the most common messages I get is, okay, Kristen, but where do I find the supplements that aren't just guesswork? Where do I actually buy the supplements you talk about? But here's the uncomfortable truth. The supplement world is not regulated the way most people assume it is. This means what is printed on the label doesn't always match what's in the capsule. And when you're spending money because you want better brain health, steadier hormones, improved energy, better sleep, you deserve to know you're buying something real. That's why I use and recommend FullScript. It is a practitioner-grade dispensary that gives you access to the same professional supplement brands I use personally and recommend to clients. These are third-party tested, handled properly, and shipped straight to your door. And when you order through my FullScript store, you'll also get a discount on every order, which really does add up when you're building a consistent protocol. I'll be honest, I'm a data person. I look at my labs, I pay attention to symptoms, I check my aura ring. I've seen how much quality matters. This is not about swallowing a cabinet full of pills. It's about choosing the right tools from the sources you can actually trust. The link is in the show notes if you want to create your free account. If you're going to invest in your brain health, make sure the supplements you buy are worthy of that investment. Now, let's set the scene for today's topic with something that might stop you in your tracks. More and more researchers have been describing Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes. That phrase comes up in the scientific literature because there's a strong relationship between Alzheimer's and metabolic dysfunction, especially in insulin resistance. A 2008 PubMed article discusses this connection directly. Type 3 diabetes. Just sit with that for a second. So what does diabetes have to do with your brain? A lot more than people think. Your brain is only about 2% of your body weight, but it uses roughly 20% of your daily glucose. Your brain is like a high-performance machine that needs steady, reliable fuel supply. And when your metabolic health is working well, your brain has better access to that fuel. This is where insulin sensitivity becomes such a big deal. When your cells respond to insulin the way they're supposed to, glucose can actually get inside the cells and be used for energy. Your brain benefits from that. You tend to get more stable energy and often better clarity. But when you're insulin resistant, the story changes. You can have plenty of sugar circulating in your bloodstream, yet your brain cells still struggle to use it effectively. It's like having a full tank of gas, but a non-working fuel pump. The fuel is there, but it's not getting where it needs to go. There also evidence that insulin resistance can affect brain function in different ways depending on the life stage and hormones. A review by Yasmin V. Doust and colleagues highlights how those effects may look different in women, particularly through hormone transitions like menopause. And here's a question I know many of you are asking right now. If this is happening, is it permanent? Good news, no. For many people, insulin resistance can improve dramatically. This is not one of those situations where you're stuck with it because of age. You can shift it, and today we're going to talk about how to do it. And for women, there's a fascinating angle here. Hormones matter. Estrogen interacts with glucose metabolism in meaningful ways, including pathways that affect glucose transport, like the GLUT4 activity in muscle and fat tissue. In plain language, when you work with your physiology intelligently, you can get a real advantage. But if you do nothing, things tend to drift in the wrong direction. Research suggests that postmenopausal women who ignore insulin resistance often see a bigger decline in metabolic health over the next decade compared to women who start addressing it early. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it because I want this to light a fire under you in the kindest way possible. If you are listening to this, you are not powerless. You have options. What might it look like if metabolic health is slipping? Well, maybe it's weight showing up around your midsection, even though you're not doing anything different. Maybe it's the afternoon crash where you feel like your brain is wrapped in cotton. And maybe it's that pull towards carbs and sugar that feels almost automatic. It might show up as brain fog, irritability, mood swings, or just not feeling like yourself. And sometimes the most frustrating part is thinking, what is wrong with me? So let me say this clearly. It is not a character flaw. It is not that you are lazy or broken. It is metabolism, and the brain feels it immediately. That's why in Build Your Base, I put metabolic health right near the top, right after sleep. Because if your brain doesn't have stable access to fuel, everything gets harder. Your mood, your patience, your memory, your ability to focus, even basic things like finding words in the middle of a conversation. Fuel first, or the brain stalls. You know those moments when you walk into a room and you forget why you went in there? Or you blank on someone's name at work and you're embarrassed even though you know it? Those are small examples, but they're reminders that the brain is incredibly sensitive to these shifts. Our goal today is steady energy, not the spikes and crashes that leave you chasing snacks, caffeine, and willpower all day long. Now, I know the diet world is loud. Maybe you've heard that keto is the answer, or Mediterranean, or carnivore, or low fat, or intermittent fasting. And maybe you've actually tried a few approaches. Maybe something helped for a while and then it stopped working. Maybe it never felt good in the first place. Here's the lens I want you to use. There isn't one perfect diet for everyone. Your best approach depends on your goals, metabolism, lifestyle, life stage, and your body's reactions. It is bio-individual. But even with all that variation, there's one thing research keeps circling back to across different dietary camps. Stable blood sugar matters for brain health. So today, we're focusing on metabolic principles you can apply to almost any eating framework. Now, let's get practical. If I had to pick one nutrition priority for women in perimenopause and beyond, it would be this: protein. Protein first, protein at every meal. And yes, you've heard that before, but today I want you to understand why it matters so much for your brain and your metabolism. A useful target for many women is about 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of their ideal body weight. This range aligns with research on what it takes to support muscle protein synthesis, including hitting leucine thresholds, which becomes more important in perimenopause when preserving muscle is not optional if you want good metabolic health. To estimate your ideal body weight, consider a healthy weight for your height, which can often be determined by consulting with a healthcare provider to find a range that's appropriate for you. Now, sources. You've got plenty of choices. Dairy, like Greek yogurt or cottage cheese, can be great if you tolerate it. Eggs, fish, poultry, meat, nuts, and seeds. For plant-based options, lentils, beans, tofu, tempeh. If you're vegetarian or vegan, just be intentional about combining protein sources to ensure a complete amino acid profile throughout the day. Also, I need to say this: if you have kidney disease or a medical condition that affects protein needs, that is a conversation for you and your healthcare provider. We're aiming for tailored, not trendy. Here's what usually happens when women try protein for the first time. They think they're doing fine, and they're at 40 or 50 grams a day. And then they realize, oh, I may need closer to double that. So let's make it real. What does 100 grams of protein look like across the day? Breakfast could be 2 eggs plus about a cup of cottage cheese, maybe with berries on the side. That's roughly 30 grams right there. Lunch might be a grilled chicken breast on a large salad with chickpeas and feta. That can easily put you around 40 grams depending on the portion size. Dinner could be a palm-sized piece of salmon with quinoa and roasted vegetables, which lands you around 35 grams. That's about 105 grams in the day, and that's before you even count the smaller contributions from things like chickpeas, quinoa, and vegetables. The shift is simple but powerful. Decide what the protein is first and build the meal around it, rather than making protein an afterthought. So why does protein deserve the headline spot? First, protein can support steadier blood sugar. Carbs on their own, especially refined carbs, can give you that quick rise and then a crash. Protein digests more slowly and helps blunt those swings so you get more stable energy. Second, protein helps you build and maintain muscle. And muscle matters because it's metabolically active tissue. More muscle generally means better insulin sensitivity and higher metabolic rate. Women naturally lose muscle as we age, and that loss accelerates after menopause. Adequate protein helps that to slow down. Third, protein helps with satiety. It's the most filling macronutrient. When protein is low, it's much easier to feel hungry an hour later and start grazing, even if you're eating healthy food. Here's one of my favorite micro habits because it's easy and gives fast feedback. For the next 3 meals, eat your protein before you eat the carbohydrates on your plate. Just try it. Then ask yourself, how's my hunger 2 hours later? How's my energy? Do I feel calmer, steadier, less snacky? This isn't about perfection. It is a tiny experiment that builds momentum. If breakfast protein is hard for you, start there. Greek yogurt with nuts and berries, eggs with spinach, cottage cheese and fruit, even leftovers from dinner if that works. And if you truly can't get enough protein with food in the morning, a clean, high-quality protein powder can help, not the artificial candy-flavored stuff. Look for something with minimal ingredients, no artificial sweeteners, and a clear protein source such as whey, pea, or soy. Certifications like NSF or Informed Choice can add another layer of confidence that what's on the label is actually what you're getting. For beginners, I recommend starting with a simple whey protein or plant-based option like pea protein, as they are widely tolerated and available. When choosing, consider any dietary needs or restrictions you may have. Now, protein is the star, but it does better with a strong supporting cast. And the big two I want you to be thinking about are fiber and phytonutrients. Fiber is a metabolic stabilizer. When fiber is present with carbs, it slows the rate at which glucose enters the bloodstream. That means fewer spikes, fewer crashes. A whole apple and apple juice do not behave the same way in your body, and fiber is a big reason why. There's also research, including a 2022 JAMA publication pointing to fiber's meaningful role in glycemic control. But fiber isn't just about blood sugar. It's also part of brain support because of the gut-brain. Your gut bacteria break down fiber and produce compounds like short-chain fatty acids, which help to lower inflammation. And if inflammation is one of the quiet drivers of cognitive decline, then supporting this gut-brain communication matters. Most women consume about 10 to 15 grams of fiber per day. For better blood sugar stability and long-term brain support, a common aim is closer to 25 to 35 grams daily. Now that can sound intimidating, but it's doable. Lentils, beans, berries, vegetables, and whole grains, if they all work well for you. And if you haven't eaten much fiber in a while, increase slowly so your gut can adapt. Now, phytonutrients. These are compounds in plants that give them their color, and they perform many protective functions, including antioxidant effects. If oxidative stress is like rust building up in the body, phytonutrients are part of what helps slow down that process. This is why you hear eat the rainbow. Different colors, different benefits. Deep blues and purples like blueberry and purple cabbage contain anthocyanins, which are associated with memory and cognitive support. Think about swapping a sugary breakfast for sugar-free Greek yogurt topped with blueberries. It's a small move, but it changes the whole direction of that morning. Bright greens like leafy greens and broccoli contain compounds such as sulforaphane, which support detox pathways and help lower inflammation. Reds and orange, like tomatoes, bell peppers, and carrots, provide carotenoids that help protect cells, including brain cells. Whites and yellows, like onions, garlic, and cauliflower, contain flavonoids and compounds that support vascular health and better blood vessel health, which means better blood flow to the brain. And this doesn't need to become a complicated project. Aim for 3 to 5 colors a day. If your plant is mostly beige, treat that as a gentle signal to add color. So the basic meal blueprint looks like this. Lead with protein, include fiber-rich plants, and add color. Stable fuel, better energy, and more brain support over time. Now, some of you are thinking, okay, Kristen, protein, fiber, color, but is there a specific eating framework designed for brain health? There are two I want to mention because they were developed specifically with neurological health in mind. The first is Keto Flex 12-3, developed by Dr. Dale Bredesen as part of his research on cognitive decline and Alzheimer's prevention. It is a flexible, plant-rich approach that emphasizes mild ketosis, a 12-hour overnight fast, and finishing your last meal at least 3 hours before bed. The keto part isn't about eating bacon all day. It's about being metabolically flexible so that your brain can use ketones as an alternative fuel source when glucose isn't optimal. The emphasis on fasting supports autophagy, which is your body's cellular cleanup process, and the plant-rich focus aligns with everything we've discussed about fiber and phytonutrients. The second is the low-carb Mediterranean diet, sometimes called the Mediterranean keto or referenced in research on the MIND diet. Traditionally, Mediterranean eating, olive oil, fish, vegetables, nuts, legumes, already has strong evidence for cardiovascular and brain health. The low-carb version simply reduces the refined grains and emphasizes the metabolic benefits we've been talking about: stable blood sugar, reduced inflammation, steady energy. What do these frameworks have in common? Both prioritize protein, both emphasize colorful, fiber-rich plants, and both limit refined carbohydrates and processed foods. Both support stable blood sugar. Sound familiar? Here's my point. If you want a structured framework to follow, these are two solid evidence-based options designed with your brain in mind. But if frameworks feel restrictive or overwhelming, you don't need one. The principles we've covered today, protein first, fiber, color, stable blood sugar, work within almost any eating style. The best approach is the one you'll actually stick with, and that's bio-individual. So let me pause and share something personal because I think it matters to know that I don't teach this from an abstract place. A few years ago, during a routine checkup, I decided to dig deeper into my metabolic markers and discovered my fasting insulin was higher than it should have been. My basic blood sugar numbers didn't wave a giant red flag. If I'd only looked at the standard test, I might have thought everything was fine. That lab result was a wake-up call. Feeling the urgency of this finding, my first step was to reassess my daily habits and nutrition. I started prioritizing protein and took brisk walks after meals as the non-negotiable part of my routine. These weren't drastic changes, but small, consistent efforts. Over time, I saw tangible results. My fasting insulin levels improved, and more than just numbers on a page, I felt a shift in my energy, my clarity, and my overall well-being. This experience reinforced something I want for you too. Small, steady choices can change your trajectory in a big way. Which brings us to the next part, knowing your numbers. And I'm not talking about the number on the scale. I'm talking about the lab markers that tell you what's happening with your metabolic health, sometimes years before you feel things are bad enough to address. Many annual checkups cover the basics. You might get a fasting glucose and a standard lipid panel, but those can miss early metabolic dysfunction. Here are the markers I care most about for metabolic health and brain support. First, fasting glucose. It gives you a baseline snapshot of blood sugar. Second, HbA1c. That is your approximate average blood glucose over about 3 months. A1C in the 5.7 to 6.4% range is associated with increased cardiometabolic risk, so it's helpful to know where you land. Third, and this one is huge, fasting insulin. Fasting insulin is often the earliest signal that your body is working too hard to keep blood sugar controlled. Insulin can climb for years while glucose stays normal. That means you can look fine on paper if you only check glucose, while your body is compensating behind the scenes. To have fasting insulin tested, you may need to ask specifically. You can tell your provider you want a more complete picture of metabolic health and you're taking prevention seriously. If your provider seems hesitant, you could say, I understand that not all tests are standard, but I believe knowing my fasting insulin levels can help me make informed decisions about my health. I've read that insulin can be an early indicator even when glucose levels appear normal, so it's important for me to have this information. You can use direct-to-consumer lab options depending on where you live through services connected to places like Function Health, which is our show sponsor, Quest, or LabCorp. If you want to look deeper, there are a few additions that can be really helpful. High sensitivity CRP or HSCRP is used to assess inflammation. In older adults, higher inflammation has been associated with lower cognitive performance. An ideal goal is often under 1 milligram per liter. A more comprehensive lipid assessment, including ApoB. ApoB can be a strong indicator of cardiovascular risk than LDL alone, and cardiovascular health and brain health are deeply connected. A full thyroid panel, not just TSH. I'm talking TSH, free T3, free T4, and antibodies. Thyroid issues are common in perimenopause and can look like fatigue, brain fog, and low mood. And nutrient labs like vitamin D, B12, and iron studies because deficiencies are common and they matter for cognition and energy. For women navigating perimenopause and menopause, hormone levels can also provide useful context. Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, especially when symptoms don't make sense. For comprehensive blood work, I personally use and recommend Function Health because they run a large panel of biomarkers and give a broad view of what's happening. There are other clinics and lab models that do similar testing, so choose what fits your needs. And listen, I get it. Testing can be expensive. If you need a budget plan, here's how I would prioritize. Start with what insurance often covers: fasting glucose, HbA1c, and a lipid panel. Most community clinics and direct lab options can also make these more affordable. If you can add anything next, add fasting insulin and a full thyroid panel. These are two areas where you can catch problems early. And if you want the most complete picture, add ApoB, vitamin D, HSCRP, and hormone testing. A lot of doctors will order these when you ask clearly. You might say something like, I want to be more proactive about my metabolic health, and I'd like fasting insulin and HbA1c included this year. According to the CDC, some people use continuous glucose monitors or CGM short-term or long-term to support their health, nutrition, or fitness goals. And I think they can be a powerful learning tool when used properly. When considering a CGM, it's important to weigh both the benefits and potential limitations. There are times when using a CGM might not be ideal, such as if financial strain is a concern, or if you have a history of anxiety that could be exacerbated by constant monitoring. A balanced approach guides you to self-assess responsibly, ensuring that tech tools enhance rather than overwhelm your wellness journey. If you are curious, consider doing it as a short trial, 2 to 4 weeks. Learn your patterns, then stop. Set an endpoint before you start. For example, decide on day 30, I'm deleting the app. That finish line matters because it prevents endless tracking. Tools like Levels Health or Dexcom Stelo, which can integrate with apps like Aura, can show you real-time responses. And it can be eye-opening. You might believe your morning smoothie is a perfect health choice, and then you watch it spike your glucose to 180. Or you might find that a certain starch keeps you elevated for hours. The goal is not to demonize foods. It is to learn how your body uses them. You can sometimes access CGMs by prescription through some pharmacies or by direct ordering, depending on the product and location. Coverage varies, and Medicare Part B covers certain diabetic testing supplies. So if you're exploring this, check what applies to you. But I want to say something clearly. You do not need a CGM to get healthier. It is optional, helpful for learning, not required for progress. And here's something else that matters just as much. Don't turn tracking into stress. After you eat, your blood glucose levels are supposed to rise. During exercise, your body shifts fuel use. Variation is normal. Think of glucose movement like waves coming in and out, not a disaster to fight all day. I've watched people get a CGM and start checking every few minutes, panicking over every rise after a meal, turning food into a math test and morality judgment. I don't want that for you. And I'm saying this from experience, not from theory. After the heartache of watching my father decline with Lewy body dementia for almost a decade, I wore a CGM for 3 straight years. It started as a proactive monitoring, and over time it became something else. Even though research, including a systematic review in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, suggests CGMs can modestly improve HbA1c in adults with type 2 diabetes, the psychological side is real. For me, I crossed the line from awareness into anxious optimization. Learning to step back and stop chasing perfect numbers was one of the hardest things I've done and one of the most important. So if you use data, use it wisely. The meaningful question is not, what was my glucose at 2:47 p.m.? The meaningful question is, what patterns am I seeing across 2 weeks? If you want some benchmarks for interpreting patterns, here are general targets many clinicians use. Fasting glucose first thing in the morning ideally stays under 100 milligrams per deciliter, often in the 70 to 90 range. After meals, a rise in blood sugar is normal. What you're looking at is the height of the spike and how long you stay elevated. Many people aim not to exceed about 120 to 140 milligrams per deciliter, and that's a number they discuss with their doctor, and to return closer to baseline within 2 hours. If you're frequently spiking to over 160 or staying elevated for more than 3 hours, that's a useful signal to investigate and adjust. Also notice variability. A constant roller coaster from 70 to 160 multiple times a day is harder on your system, even if your average looks okay. Again, patterns over time matter. One number on one day is not a verdict. Now for the part I love, because it's accessible. You can improve metabolic health with strategies that are free or close to free. One of the best is a brisk 10-minute walk after meals. It doesn't require a gym. It doesn't require special gear. It is simple, and research consistently supports that post-meal walking can reduce glucose spikes. If you want this to actually stick, link it to something that already happens. Maybe it's right after you clear the table. Maybe it's right after you start the dishwasher, and make it pleasant. Put on a playlist you love. Call a friend. Let it be a life habit, not a punishment. Another strategy is to eat your protein and vegetables before carbs. The order matters. Fiber and protein first can slow glucose absorption and soften the spike from starches and sugar that come later in the meal. Also add many movement breaks. Every hour, stand up and stretch, walk to refill water, take the stairs, park farther away. The point is to break up long sitting blocks because that also affects insulin sensitivity. And start paying attention to your energy patterns as your feedback system. Do you crash at 3 p.m.? Are you ravenous when you wake up? Do you feel foggy after certain meals? You don't need an app to notice these signals. If you want a low-friction way to track without obsessing, try a simple food-to-feeling journal. Write what you ate, and then 2 hours later, jot down how you feel. Satisfied? Sleepy? Clear? Snacky? Over time, patterns show up without calorie counting. Remember, this journaling is entirely optional and can be adapted to fit your lifestyle. Consider using audio notes or quick mental check-ins if that suits you better. The idea is to keep it flexible and supportive of your well-being. And don't underestimate hydration. Dehydration can worsen blood sugar regulation and brain function. Keep water nearby and drink consistently. Your body is giving you the information all day long. Fancy tools can make it louder, but the information is there either way. Now, I want to paint a picture of what we're trying to prevent, because once you recognize it, you can interpret it. It is the blood sugar roller coaster. You wake up and either skip breakfast or just have coffee. Mid-morning, you're running on stress hormones. You grab something quick like a muffin. Glucose shoots up, then it drops. You get tired, foggy, irritable. You reach for more carbs or more caffeine. Another spike, another crash. By the end of the day, you're exhausted but wired. Dinner turns into overeating because your body is trying to make up for the day. And then sleep suffers, which makes metabolic health worse the next day, and you're back on the ride again. Now, let's flip it. You wake up and you eat a protein-forward breakfast like eggs with vegetables or Greek yogurt with nuts and berries. Your glucose rises more gently and comes down gradually. You feel steady. You're not hunting for snacks. Your brain feels more online. Lunch supports you instead of knocking you out. By evening, you're not crawling to the pantry, and your body can actually settle down for sleep. That's the direction we're going for. Steadier fuel, steadier brain. So let's wrap it up into a simple takeaway. Your brain needs a reliable source of energy. During perimenopause and beyond, hormonal shift, especially dropping estrogen, can increase insulin resistance, which can make it harder for your brain to efficiently access glucose. The way forward is not extreme, it is consistent. Prioritize protein at every meal, aiming for roughly 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. Get blood work that actually tells the truth early, especially fasting insulin and HbA1c. And if you want, consider a short CGM trial to learn patterns and then step away from constant monitoring. Use the free strategies that work: a 10-minute walk after meals, ordering food with protein and veggies first, movement breaks, hydration, and paying attention to how you feel after eating. And remember, insulin resistance in perimenopause is not a life sentence. These habits don't just slow risk down, they can improve underlying physiology. Here's your challenge for the week. Try protein first at every meal. Start your plate with the protein before you move on to carbs. If you want accountability, invite a friend to it. Text each other protein first before meals this week. Simple, but surprisingly effective. When we normalize these changes, it makes it easier for everyone to follow through. Next week, we're moving to increased daily movement section of Build Your Base. We'll talk about why the 10,000 step goal started as marketing, what the research actually says about steps in brain health, and why balance might be the fitness metric you're overlooking. Before you go, if you're struggling with brain fog or sleep issues, or you're just tired of being told it's normal aging, I want you to have my free guide, The Brain Fog Solution, your guide to mental clarity during menopause. It covers which foods actually help rebuild your brain cells, the sleep strategies that made a real difference for me, how to have better conversations with your doctor about hormones. Download it for free at the link in the show notes. And I want to hear from you. What's the hardest part of nutrition for you right now? Is it breakfast? Is it cravings? Is it meal planning? Send me a message and tell me what you're working on. Thanks for spending this time with me. Take care of your beautiful brain. The disclaimer: I am a health coach and not a licensed medical professional. This podcast is for general, educational, and informational purposes only and isn't a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always talk with your physician or another qualified healthcare provider about your personal situation. This podcast and the show notes may contain affiliate links. If you use them to make a purchase, I may earn a commission at no additional cost to you, which helps me to offset the cost to produce this show. As an Amazon associate, I earn from qualifying purchases.